Hey everybody, welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode 236, being recorded on February 5th, 2014. I'm Ryan Shrout.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Judge Wallace, and I'm drinking a lot of beer right now.
I'm Allyn.
And we're going to talk really fast. We can get as much of the podcast in before it crashes. If you want to watch us live, go to pcpro.com/subscribe. Hey, that was pretty good, actually. Oh, wait.
Keep going.
That one?
Don't stop!
So pcpro.com/subscribe. You go there if you want to be notified when we go live, and then you can watch all the stuff that happened today before we actually started recording the show. And maybe that's interesting to you, maybe it's not. As some people in the chat rooms think, it's nice to know that PC problems happen to the rest of us and not just to them. And yeah, enjoy that. So let's talk about what happened this week. And I think the biggest story of the week was easily the finally the release of AMD's Mantle.
West New Child? Northwest?
We don't want to talk about the Super Bowl, do we?
Oh, no.
Did you see the Skittles commercial?
No.
I was wearing my Bengals shirt, and I was kind of waiting for Josh to say something so I could go, well, we almost scored as many points in the Super Bowl as the Denver Broncos did.
Ooh.
Almost. But you know what? I know that for the past couple days, you've just been watching that Carl's Jr. video over and over and over again about the breakfast sausage.
I actually don't know what that is. We don't have Carl's Jr. here, so we don't get those ads.
Well, never mind then.
So the biggest news of the last week was the release of AMD Mantle. I think at last week's podcast, none of this had happened yet, right? So what happened on Thursday morning, technically Eastern Time Zone?
You were teased. You were teased with drivers and software.
Well, I definitely was that. But on Thursday morning, Battlefield 4 was updated to add support for Mantle. I think that happened like Wednesday night, Thursday morning at like 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. or something like that Eastern Time. And so there was a Mantle available code path in Battlefield 4. The problem, of course, was that there was no driver available to enable Mantle support in anything, let alone Battlefield 4. What we did have at midnight that night, kind of a few hours before that release came out, was a little preview story that we published that kind of talked about Catalyst 14.1 beta, that we didn't know exactly when it was going to be out, but that it was going to be out eventually, and here are the features that it added. So first thing I want to touch on is that this is actually the first driver that adds phase 2 of frame pacing. We did talk about that? Okay. Did we talk about that?
No, I didn't talk about
Hybrid
that.
Crossfire?
We talked about dual graphics, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So,
Yeah, dual graphics, but not the...
So
anyway,
what this
go ahead.
does is it brings, if you go back to, say, I don't know, July, when Phase 1 was starting to be released, and that was, it added support for frame pacing for Crossfire at resolutions of 2560 by 1600 and below. And that was great. It was fine, except for a whole bunch of people had bought Crossfire, had bought multiple graphics cards to run Crossfire on Eyefinity, which is multiple panels. Josh, I think you might be one of those people. Jeremy, I think you might be one of those people.
I might be.
And they...
No, I went NVIDIA because software was much better for it.
It was. It absolutely was. So they promised us back then, way back in July and August, that, hey, we'll add support for 4K resolution, which is technically an Eyefinity configuration, and actual Eyefinity setups. And with this driver on, when did it release? February 2nd, I guess, they finally added support in there for it. So now if you have a pair of HD 6000 or HD 7000 or 280s, 270s, that kind of thing, and you run Crossfire and you have multiple monitors, you can do so, and now frame pacing is supported. It still does not support DX9, and at this point, it's not going to happen. I'm sorry, guys. Like DirectX 9, if you have a really good DirectX 9 game you like to play,
Skyrim.
I actually asked on Twitter, I think last week, for people to give me ideas what games are coming out that are DX9, because I would like to know. And there's still a lot of free-to-play games that are very, very popular that are running on DX9. So that's a disappointing aspect of it, but it is fixed now. If you read our dual graphics article where we had the Kaveri APU with the R7 250. That is the same thing. That is a phase 2 addition to the Catalyst 14.1 code path. So that's good news. They also initially told us that HSA support was included with 14.1 beta. And it wasn't until like 2 days after the driver was released when we were actually trying to test HSA software for some stuff we're working on. And I was like, hey, this is really weird. Like, we're using your 14.1 driver. The HSA just doesn't seem to be working. And they're like, yeah, let me go check on that. And they came back and said it actually had not been put in 14.1. So it does not have HSA support. That information is still out there that it's included. It doesn't really affect many people because there's not really HSA software available right now.
There are 2 CPUs out in the world that have HSA.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's not really that big a deal for the majority of people, but just to be clear, it is not in there. Now, the biggest thing, or second biggest thing, depending on if you think Mantle is a bigger deal than actually having Crossfire support for iFinity, flagship technology that AMD's had for years and years, is the addition of Mantle support into the driver. So this is the first driver that adds support for Mantle. Mantle, of course, is a new gaming API that AMD developed, co-developed with DICE, essentially, to replace DirectX, replaced OpenCL with a lower level, lower overhead, thank you, API software layer between games and the graphics card that they're running on. It's long been known that DirectX in particular creates a high amount of CPU overhead on the system as a whole for the translation process from graphics hardware to driver to game.
And it's shockingly single-threaded.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
Somewhat, but mostly yes.
It's been a very slow, painful move to any kind of multi-threaded capability with DirectX, for sure. So Mantle was their answer that they announced back in September to fix it. It was supposed to be the Mantle Battlefield 4 was supposed to be available in December. It didn't happen. It was supposed to happen in January, and it kind of happened because the Mantle patch was available, I think, January 30th or January 31st, one of those. And then the driver came February 1st or 2nd or close enough, I guess, in that regard. So that was kind of the setup for it, right? We didn't have a driver to test at that point. We were given some numbers of what to expect. The expectations are when you are in a CPU bound situation, whether that be in a particular game that is very CPU limited, or your hardware configuration is set up in such a way that you are CPU limited, that you will see significant performance advantages with Mantle than DirectX 11. In instances where you are not CPU bound, say you have a Sandy Bridge E or an Ivy Bridge E processor, those differences between Mantle and DX11 are going to be much, much, much smaller. And in my testing and a lot of other testing that I've seen on other websites, that difference can be close to 0 in those instances. So that's worth considering. For example, AMD's numbers here, if you look at the little collection of data we have, a 4960X, which is the flagship Ivy Bridge E, plus an R9 290X, they're seeing 9% and 10% improvement in Mantle. And my guess is that's a very high side of what you would expect with those two components. But if you look at maybe you have that same R9 290X, and for some reason you paired that with an A10 7700K Kaveri APU, which is it's an okay processor, but it's obviously it's a lot slower on a per thread basis than,
because a lot of us buy $129 processors to pair with our $500 video card.
I agree that it sounds odd.
And don't mention the RAM.
Yeah, well, we don't need fast RAM for this because you're not using the integrated graphics part, really. I would say this, Josh. If you go look on some specific areas, like if you go to the Build a PC subreddit, and you look at some of these PC builds that people are recommending to each other, most consistently now, I see a lot of systems that are they're using like Pentium, like Haswell-based Pentium or Ivy Bridge-based Pentium-branded processors, like trying to squeeze $20, $30 out in every area in order to apply that to the graphics card. Now, I think this particular example is at the super extreme of that, where I don't think anybody would recommend that. But I wouldn't say it's impossible to think that somebody would have like a 7700K paired with like a 270X, maybe, for example. But that's still a big performance thing there. But anyway, if you had a 77K, sorry, with an R9 290X GPU at 1080p, they say they saw performance up to 40% better. Now that's huge. 40% is a huge jump. It's just a matter of where that is happening, how often that is happening. There's a whole lot of different variables that go into that. The other thing that AMD wanted to make very apparent about this, and as became very apparent to me as we were using it, is that this is a beta driver in the most beta sense that I have seen in a long time.
It's like Alpha Plus.
Yeah, it really is, right? So if you look at the list of caveats and issues that were posted with this driver, things like performance improvements for Mantle on the HD 7000 series, the 280X, the 270X will be optimized for BF4 in future AMD Catalyst releases. Mantle will run on those graphics cards, but it's not going to improve performance nearly as much as it will in the 290, 290X, or 260X. Those are the cards that they focused on first. How about the multi-GPU support is patchy at best. Most people that I've talked to have been unable to get multi-GPU to work with Battlefield 4 in Mantle mode. The interesting thing about that is that Crossfire is now completely at the mercy, or if you want to say completely at the helm of the developer, right? So they have complete ability to use the GPUs in a unique way where they don't have to do AFR, they don't have to do alternate frame rendering. They can break up the workload dynamically and intelligently and do some really cool stuff that way, but that also means the developer has to do all that work. And so somebody like DICE and the Frostbite engine, they might have the resources and capability to do that. Other developers will have to see how that pans out. So some people were able to get Crossfire to work. I was not able to get Crossfire to work, and I was told that even if you get Crossfire to work, frame pacing is not enabled. It's not integrated into what the Frostbite engine has today with Mantle. So even if you get Crossfire to work, I think we're reverting back to a pre-frame pacing days of Crossfire, so it may not even be a worthwhile thing to get into, even if you have it there. There was a lot of stability issues. There are some bugs where there are image quality differences between the DX11 version and the Mantle version that Johan has come up on Twitter and said those aren't performance affecting, they're simply visual bugs, and we're working on those. So if you take him at his word for that, then you would assume that the Mantle performance differences are not because of image quality differences. But until they're exactly the same, then you have to start to question that kind of stuff. So eventually we did get the driver, and we ran a few tests. Now,
and it only took you like 18 hours to actually get results.
God, it was a pain in the butt.
So much for your weekend, huh?
Yeah. we have a certain section of Battlefield 4 that we run through for our tests that we have used in other articles, right? And it is on the SP DAM level, and it's one of the intro sequences, and a lot of it is kind of pre-scripted so that it's highly repeatable and there's very little interaction the user has to do, and that's good for a GPU-bound test, right? Because now we know that the GPU is being taxed, we're not being affected by, we're being affected by as little user error as possible, which is what you want in any kind of semi-scientific analysis of things. The problem is we ran a bunch of these tests in that particular section, and we saw very poor results for Mantle. And I went to AMD and I said, hey, none of my answers look like the answers you told me that I should be expecting. Why is that? And they said that that particular section and a lot of pre-scripted, what they call cutscenes sections of Battlefield 4 are seeing little to no performance gains with Mantle. So after having done many hours of testing to gather all the data and then start to analyze the data to see where the performance differences are, to be told that all that data is wrong and you need to go find a new place to test. So we did end up doing that as well, but we presented data from both. We tested with a Core i7-3960X Ivy Bridge E and an A10-7850K APU with a 290X. Again, trying to do AMD give them the best chance possible to showcase this while talking about the limitations of those things. And let's see, if you look at the single player results, like actually Mantle was slower in my testing than the D3D DX11 version at 1080p. Again, in that section that AMD said that they have seen those particular results. But what is kind of interesting, this is frame time data. You can see it's very similar there. This is GPU time data, and then they have CPU time data, which is interesting because it lets you know how much how much the CPU is, is it a bottleneck, right? And what's interesting is this blue line is the Mantle line. And even though it's not affecting our frame rate and our overall gaming experience a whole lot, you can see that the CPU is being utilized more efficiently. See these green spikes and kind of stutters in CPU processing time. They're gone from the blue line. And just in general, the blue line is thinner and more consistent than the green line that represents DX11. So there are improvements, but it's not manifesting itself in the actual gameplay. This is another instance of the same type of thing. You can see here, there's tons of CPU time spikes that do not show up on the Mantle version there. Now, we did run some multiplayer, and the multiplayer is basically the best case scenario for Mantle, right? So we pick a 64-player map that is nearly full on, I think it was the MP Naval map. I can't remember what the actual name of the map is. Paracel Storm, I think is what it's called. There you go. And again, this is the A10-7850K with the 290X. Maybe a little bit of a stretch for a user goal there, but now you can see we're going from 51 to 71 frames per second. I will obviously give the caveat that because it's a multiplayer test, these tests are not identical. There are differences in what interaction is happening each time. There are differences in time of day. The lighting of it can be a little bit different. We tried to wait for the the beginning of a server map each time and go from there. So there are definitely. This is why we don't normally test with multiplayer maps, I guess is what I would say. But again, if we look at the CPU, that's the GPU time. If we look at the CPU time graph for that, you can see that consistently the CPU time in the blue here representing Mantle is significantly lower and shorter than the green line of DX11. So that's a plus there. And again, we have another test that we did the same thing at 2560 by 14 or 2560 by 1600, and our performance went up from like 38 to 56. So now we're talking about 27-30% performance gains. Pretty impressive stuff. And again, if you look at the CPU time, clearly an advantage for what Mantle was able to do there.
Yeah, you gotta love that flat line.
Yeah, it's good, right? It's just a matter of the issue with Mantle is it will probably lower your CPU utilization. It's will that matter for you? If you're a gamer that's on a 4770K or even a 4670K, my guess is right now, as it stands, that the performance differences you're going to see are fairly minimal and probably are not worth the potential stability, image quality concerns that are currently there in its early beta state. If you're one of those gamers that we get emails like all the time, says, "Hey, how can I stretch my dollar the most? I have $300, but I have this old." Maybe you have a Core 2 quad or something like that, right? That's aging. And you want to put a 270X in there. And I can say, yeah, that's fine. If, Battlefield 4 is indicative of what we might see in the future, this is pretty cool stuff. But, it's obviously Mantle's not in every game. This is not something that AMD can implement at the driver level. This has to be at the engine level. So that's kind of my first run through there. What do you guys think?
3D now! Exclamation mark.
Okay. Elaborate, but in a shorter.
Okay, AMD came out with their SIMD instructions before Intel did with KNI, which later turned into SSE. Do we know anything about 3D now?
No.
No, everybody went SSE. So I'm not directly comparing this to it, but I'm just saying this could potentially be what we see, because if OpenGL
you would see that if
and
like a new
DirectX guys say, you know what, there's something to this, we've got to make this more efficient.
So if, for example, a new version of OpenGL or DirectX were released that looked at this and said, hey, that's a really good idea, I'm going to steal that and implement it, but on a universal kind of vendor agnostic method.
Yeah, then it would be a fantastic thing if they could do that. Now, if AMD was able to push the industry that way, yeah, they invested all this money in Mantle. DICE invested time and effort and money into it as well.
Yeah, sure.
Then everything would be, it would be a good change for the industry. But is Microsoft going to do that? Is the Kronos Group going to do that? I would hope so, but we haven't seen any indication so far.
Yes.
You're not adding to the conversation.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, what is it really going to take for Microsoft, say, to optimize DirectX CPU-wise?
It's interesting because everybody will tell you that they have been bitching at Microsoft since like DX8 or 9. Basically, I guess 9 is when they did. When was programmable really like fully implemented?
I think it was 9.
Well, DX8 was integer-based programmable.
Yeah.
So DX8 or DX9, most of the major developers will tell you that they've been telling Microsoft, "Hey, you are abstracting too much, right? We need you to get some of that overhead gone." And Microsoft had, they had different goals than the big developers. They wanted more developers, so they wanted it to be ease of use for programming, so they wanted to make it higher level, right? And a lot of the guys that like at the time that would have been id Software and Epic wanted to get lower level, right? So it'll be interesting to see if Mantle takes off, or if anybody else were to kind of go down that path, how long it would take to get there.
It would be years, no matter who did it, whether Kronos or Microsoft.
Yeah.
Years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else, Allyn or Jeremy, thoughts on like where we're at with Mantle now?
Still
It's
beta.
going to be neat to... Oh. You got something to say, Al?
It's like alpha beta to me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Revenge of the Nerds, Alpha Beta,
Ooh.
Alpha Beta.
Yeah, but the beginning of the movie when they're losing, not the end of the movie when they've proven themselves.
right, they're not there yet.
We hope.
Yeah.
But the one thing I saw that was neat was Legit Reviews actually grabbed Starswarm, which has been, mentioned heavily by AMD and a couple of other places, but essentially right now exists on Steam as mostly a benchmark.
Yep.
And they were seeing, for the most part, 15-20% increase, except for one particular test where it was closer to about 30%. But it's nice to sort of see that, there is actually engines being programmed from the ground up for Mantle right now. Mm-hmm. So as Mantle matures, at best, we're going to get a whole new API to work with. At worst, I'm hoping the DX guys are going to get a little bit of a kick in the pants and say, yeah, maybe we should stop just making things shinier and actually work on making this work a little bit better with modern hardware.
Fair enough. Yeah, I hope that's the case too. I will say my last kind of thought on Mantle. A lot of times people get on me because I'm hard on AMD, and I really, really wanted Mantle to be a big shakeup for PC gaming when it launched, and I'm disappointed that it came out a month later than expected, which could be, so when the delay was announced from December to January, it was like, Battlefield 4 has these other issues. We're gonna make sure that those stability issues are fixed, etc. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm totally fine with that. Meanwhile, in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, this is okay. AMD has a whole extra month now of lead time to get things ready. And the fact that with that extra time, they still launched without Crossfire working, that they launched with some major stability issues. They launched with a focus on only a few of their mini graphics cards that will support Mantle, that they weren't ready when the actual Battlefield 4 patch went live. is a little bit of a letdown, and it worries me a little bit that if more and more game developers actually start to adopt this, will they have the manpower to essentially work with each one of them individually to fix their libraries and maintain Mantle in a way that it is usable for everybody? Because that's not a small commitment, right? I'm going to guess, Josh, I'm not a huge software guy, but Mantle's got to be way more complicated today than Glide was.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, creating an API like this is not insignificant. I mean, the idea is, hey, let's simplify things. Let's get them down these, kind of concrete paths, and it should work in this way under the vast majority of cases. But unfortunately, there's a large amount of corner cases with programming, especially if you're doing in C, C++, whatever. You're not, programming in assembly, and you're not actively saying, hey, you need to address this, memory space and this one, and when you have a result, you got to write directly to here, because we've got machines that have anywhere from 2 gigs of memory up to 16 and 32 gigs, and so a lot of the addressing things and low-level stuff you cannot replicate from machine to machine, which is why DirectX and OpenCL are a higher level. Right. They take care of a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of wiggle room. Ooh. There's a lot of, hot dog down the hallway. Haven't heard that in a while. That, it takes care of, but unfortunately that takes cycles. And it adds to the inefficiency of the programming language, whatever you're using, just to make sure that it works on this huge spectrum of products that have, dual core at 2 gigs and 16 core at 32 gigs. And you're hoping that they all work the same and you can scale in performance. And Mantle probably does not look at all those corner cases as well as, a more generalized OpenCL or DirectX.
Yeah. One more comment here. I'm not going to dive too much into it because this is really something that you guys should go read if you're interested in it. Scott sent in some questions to AMD specifically about Mantle, so it's kind of an interview form story. And I'm not going to try to pronounce this name because I'm an awful person and I didn't look up how to pronounce the chief architect of Mantle's name over at AMD. Anybody?
Isn't it Guennadi Riguer?
Yeah, I think so.
Guennadi? Is that okay?
Guennadi Riguer.
Like Giovanni?
Okay,
almost.
Good.
Guennadi.
Good for you guys.
Guennadi.
Great. I'm glad you're on the show now because saved us there. Scott asked some questions of him about compatibility between Mantle and HLSL, right? So some of these more programming-based issues. Questions about can you use Mantle for compute, memory transfers, video encode. What other questions we have in here? Be able to address any and all compatible GPUs. Will this support and encourage users to leave past generation GPUs in their system during upgrades for applications in which they can effectively load balance? So getting back to the idea of non-symmetrical multi-GPU systems. And I think that's definitely something that can be done based on how Mantle multi-GPU has been described to me. So go check out that interview. That was really well done. We just posted that up today. And also moving along in the name of time, Steve posted another review of a...
Hey, Steve!
Lenovo ThinkPad T440S Ultrabook review, the ultimate business portable and Ultraportable. And you can tell it's awesome because it lays flat. That's useful for something, right?
Well, no, people just do that sometimes.
Even when it's not supposed to?
Yeah.
So this is a Haswell-based, 4200U. It's an Ultrabook. It's got the HD 4400 graphics, 4 gigs of memory, 128 gig Samsung 840 series SSD. It is a 14-inch screen with a 1080p resolution matte IPS display, which is, I think, impressive. Semi-matte. which I don't really know what that means. But you can see the review of this if you're interested in it. That's a little bit of a uncomfortable looking lay down when it's flat like that. But hey, good for Lenovo on there. I mean, it's an Ultrabook. It's labeled, but it does have a full size Ethernet port, which is interesting. Maybe it's not an Ultrabook. Maybe it's just an Ultraportable, but I don't know. This is kind of like the S is the thin and light, or the thin version of the ThinkPad T440, right, Ken? That's what the S is kind of indicative of there. But then, of course, you can get this battery option, or you can get this battery option that obviously makes it quite a bit less thin at the expense or at the benefit of additional power. So it's nice to see, like, let's see, what does he have? Both of them here. So the 3-cell battery gets you 9.5 hours on the reader test, while the 6-cell battery gets you 22 hours on the reader test. Take those numbers not as hard numbers for battery life if you're using it on Wi-Fi and that kind of stuff. Just use them for relative comparisons here. You can see we've got lots of Lenovo's in there, the MSI G40 as well. So performance is okay, not fantastic as you would expect. You can kind of see, if you look at this line of Lenovo machines here, you can tell they all are essentially using the same kind of processor platform as most Ultrabooks have kind of become homogenized when it comes to performance. So, that's Intel's fault, I guess we'll say, right? It's not necessarily a really awful thing, but it's definitely because of the restrictions placed on these vendors by Intel. Gaming, it's going to be okay. I wouldn't do it. You can play StarCraft 2 at 1366 by 768. You can play Diablo 3, not really. If you lower it below high detail, you could do it. Turn off AA, you could probably do it. Here you go. Here it is, low detail, AA off. Just about 30 frames per second. You could do it if you had to, but maybe you shouldn't.
You don't want to.
It's a Lenovo. I mean, it's a ThinkPad. Like, what are you doing? Get back to work. Come on. But he really did like it. It's under $1,500, I guess, and it got a gold award. And there's a whole bunch of other photos and stuff.
How much does it cost again?
About $1,500.
Huh.
Yeah.
Because it's the slim supermodel edition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, how about those MSI laptops that,
I don't know. I don't have one.
$1,200.
Are you talking about the GE stuff, or are you talking about the?
I don't. Yeah, overpowered GPU to a not fantastic AMD mobile CPU.
So that was our reviews and articles for the week. Let's run through a couple of these news things. If you liked our video that we talked about last week, that talked about the 7850K versus the GeForce GT630 graphics card, you'll be glad to know that we have another version of it that looks at free-to-play games. A couple of these I had not actually had any experience with before this video, like Warframe. Saw a lot of people playing it at QuakeCon, actually, when Tom and I were kind of wandering around, but never actually got a chance to play it. So
Is that about house builders fighting?
It's pretty close. It's actually a over-the-shoulder third-person shooter of some kind, right? And we got League of Legends in there, Dota 2. What else is in there, Ken? World of Tanks and World of Warplanes. Which World of Warplanes is way more fun than World of Tanks, as far as I'm concerned. And it's actually, I wish the people who make Battlefield would go to World of Warplanes and see how easy it is. They make it to fly a plane with a mouse and keyboard. It's entirely possible without.
Somebody didn't like Janes.
Yeah, they don't have helicopters in this though, and I've never been able to do that successfully in Battlefield 3 or 4. That much is for sure. Jeremy, what do you know about the Chromebox from ASUS?
The Chromebox? Well, people seem to be fairly impressed about this thing. I gotta say, it is cute for one of these small form factor guys. And it's sort of nice to see, Chromeboxes. We heard about them, we were so excited, and we just sort of saw them peter out. This one looks a lot of fun because you can fit up to a Core i7 4600 U processor into it. you're probably more likely to go with the i3 or the Celeron option, but there's no reason not to go higher. And so you're looking at this little tiny thing, which is going to be capable of 4K output. It's intriguing. I mean, this is sort of the market segment that Zotac has taken over there, that a couple of other places have. ASUS, you haven't really thought of them recently, at least doing that sort of thing. But at $180, which is what they're sort of pegging this at for probably for the base Celeron version, that could almost be an impulse buy.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm not 100% sure. I'm pretty sure this is based on the Nook platform. I think it's
kind of looks
Gigabyte bricks.
Yeah, no, he's cuter than bricks.
So I imagine that after the bricks was a successful product, there were some people inside ASUS that were upset that they had not built that product first, because Intel has been
really smart with this one.
Yeah, well, Intel's been
HDMI and DisplayPort.
Yeah, I think the Bricks Pro has HDMI and DisplayPort as well.
Yeah, the Pro, which is not $180.
It is most definitely not $180. This was actually it's a cool looking device for a 4x4 square essentially. It is fanless, which I think is pretty neat.
Especially with the i7.
It's smaller than a bread box.
It is smaller than a bread box. Yeah. Okay. Yep. I gotcha. Yep. I don't know. You could obviously install Windows on this machine.
Oh, gotcha.
Which is what I
Not
think more people would do with it. The Chromebox angle is interesting. I haven't heard much about Chromebooks or boxes. Like, I don't know. Ken's telling me that they're selling a lot of them. I just have not seen people utilizing them, I guess. Right? I don't like actual consumers, educational markets. They make a lot of sense too, but
Dell just put out a new Chromebook 11, and I thought that was kind of weird because I have not seen an announcement of, say, I'm putting out a new Chromebook in quite a while. ASUS is up to 13 or so, but they just don't catch on.
The Chromebooks are usually the top selling items under laptops on Amazon.
And that's a lot to do with price, for sure.
Well, yeah, but they're still selling.
I would like to know what the return rates are on Chromebooks.
Mine doesn't run Office.
Well, I wonder how many people just think it's a laptop and don't realize that
I
they
want
can't
a Surface
run
instead.
Their programs on it and do stuff. But there are probably some people that buy it that only use Gmail or some email client, and they're probably perfectly fine with it. I don't have a problem with them, and I like the idea of it. I don't feel like it has been the world-changing device and platform that many people thought it might be. But at $179 with an operating system, basically, right, that runs browser and browser-side
Well, that's
apps.
part of the reason it's so cheap.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty awesome, right? $179 for that system. And I think that'll be available in March. It says. I think the main issue here is we do not know if the Core i7 version will actually be making its way over to the US. The Core i3 model will, but the Core i7, we don't know if it's coming over or not. So make your voice known to ASUS if you wanted to.
Something that just came up to me.
Okay.
We haven't heard about one laptop per child in a long time, but take a look at all of these open source, small, kind of rugged, very inexpensive products and think what all came of that program.
Didn't that guy take all that money and run away or something?
No, I mean, he
that was a different one.
Yeah, different guy. Huh. No, I mean, one laptop per child was mildly successful in that they didn't waste a lot of money. However, sending a lot of these products to the areas they did, the people there, when they received them, did kind of waste the products. But
yeah,
with Chromebooks, you have a far simpler OS. You've got a simpler amount of applications you can use. And this is like almost a mature version of one laptop per child. I mean, you've got a relatively inexpensive product that does a lot of work, but, more in a focused manner. I mean, you have, spreadsheet, Word, basic browsing, but you're not going to have a whole lot of games, third-party stuff,
Angry Birds,
publication. Yeah.
But one of the things they did was ruggedize it. And this thing is not really ruggedized.
No, the one laptop per child thing was definitely meant to be used by children.
It had the hand crank.
I would say most Chromebooks
don't have a hand crank.
They're a lot of plastic, right? So
yeah.
All right. Let's see what else we got on the list here. Just a couple more things. AMD adds open source to their hardware-based video encoder. Jeremy, why is that important?
Well, because they haven't really updated it since the last generation of cards. So this is the first time we're actually seeing GCN being able to do hardware transcoding on mostly Linux with a VCE2 hardware encoding engine. So this is, fairly big news for those people who are, productive with their silicon. They're not just using it for gaming. They're actually using it to create content. And so the nice thing with this is that by encoding or by allowing VCE2 encoding, that means you get GStreamer OpenMax support, which is essentially the go-to for H.264 for mobile. It's not just limited to mobile; you can also do it for full-on PCs. But it's kind of nice to sort of see that AMD, who have, both NVIDIA and AMD have had pretty bad reps about dealing with the open source community until the last couple of years. When they've suddenly realized that, hey, this is actually a smart thing to do. So AMD sort of dropped a bit of their backwards compatibility, but for the new stuff, Graphics Core Next is now supported, and you're going to see huge, huge benefits when you're encoding.
I wonder how much of this has to do with the SteamOS and people wanting to maybe get game streaming applications up and running on Linux and being able to take advantage of the video encoding engines in these GPUs.
Yep. Well, I think that's a huge part of this.
Yep. One last bit of news here. This is something Scott posted up. Apparently, well, we do know this, Adobe CC is accelerating some filters via OpenCL. AMD contacted NitroWare, who we may have heard of this guy, with information.
Knigget writer.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's him. No, I think it's like Arbiter or Ericon or I don't know anybody else.
Mlock.
It could be anybody in there, really.
Yeah, God, I have no idea.
Claims an 11-fold performance increase with the Smart Sharpen on Kaveri, specifically the computer hardware site decided to test these claims, and there's a video here, which I'll just click here and. Oh man, nice to see.
Oh, nice unpixelization.
So yeah, Dominic tested that. If you want to see how the performance actually scales with OpenCL, there, I will say that is it's not an HSA implementation. It's just OpenCL, but because Kaveri has. It has an HSA compatible driver that you don't have access to yet because it's not in 14.1, but I have access to it, and it actually improves OpenCL a little bit more because of that. Just because their OpenCL stack is now kind of taking advantage of some of the HSA functionality there. So if you are interested in the potential of OpenCL for all these other applications, things that that we're kind of used to seeing, but are still coming into the mainstream fold. This is obviously one filter out of many, many, many filters that Photoshop has, but it's a good start. And I hate saying that, but it's because it feels like we've had GPU accelerated software starting for a decade, so we'll get there. We'll get there. Now, we're going to get into our hardware software picks of the week. But before we do, we really haven't heard from our friend Allyn yet. Allyn, are you there?
I am.
No, he's not.
He's not there. Actually, I know he's there because now Ken has provided these little thumbnails in the corner of the screen that I see so I can spy on everybody. I know when they're leaving or sleeping or something like that.
Oh, you've seen some things then, Ryan.
Yeah, I really don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
So it turns out that our friend Allyn got married.
I did.
Just this past Saturday, I guess it was.
You fool!
Yeah, it was a Saber Point marriage, right?
Run, fools!
Yes, it was. It was at Sword Point, the marriage.
Yeah. It was. Now, who was threatening who with the sword, though?
It's the S word.
She was pointing the sword at moi.
Okay, all right. And you came out unscathed from it?
Turnabout is fair play, isn't it, Allyn?
It was. I got this scar on my face in a mighty battle.
Yeah. But then you guys actually used the sword to cut the cake, right?
Yep.
And the rubber hose marks later on.
Yeah.
Hey, I didn't want to get into what happened later in the night. Like, that's not my problem.
Nope.
And I don't want it to be. I don't want it. Please, Josh, if you took photos, I don't want to see them. I don't know.
You know better than that because Allyn will never invite me to anything personal in his life.
No, I just know that if somebody was going to take pictures, it would be Allyn. Allyn would be the photographer of all that. So I just want to say congratulations, Allyn. Good job.
Good job. Thank you.
And I can't believe you're such a fool. Didn't all of us who
you married an archivist. She's going to remember everything.
I know.
She's writing all that shit down now.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, that's all. That's all I wanted to do. I want to make sure everybody knew that if you have well wishes for Allyn, you can find him on Twitter at Malventano if you want to make fun of him for something, or that's fine too.
Something else happened the day before that.
Laser surgery.
Oh, you also retired from the Navy.
I did.
They kicked
he stopped
his
sailing
ass out.
the seven seas.
They kicked his ass straight out that Navy.
Yep.
And he's reaching for something. What's that?
Now he hangs out at the YMCA.
Okay, so wait. So you retired from the Navy the day before. So why were you married in uniform with an honor guard the day after?
You're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
That's illegal.
It's illegal. It's like I'm not in college anymore, but I still go to fraternity events.
Well, that's because you're an asshole.
I'm the 32-year-old guy that goes to the Rush party. It's like,
dude. When I was Russian 15 years ago.
In 1987. Actually, I was...
So you're Will Ferrell.
I was 6 years old when I was 1987.
Let's go streaking.
Gotta go streaking through the quad.
Let's watch Old School.
It was a funny movie, though.
It was.
All right, let's get into our hardware picks of the week, or software, I guess.
Nope.
Okay. So mine is we've talked about SSD prices quite a bit recently, but this one came to my attention again. The Crucial M500 960 gig SSD. Which controller is this using again, Al?
Which one? Marvell.
Marvell.
Yep.
And it's good. It's decent. It's not great, but it's fine.
It's a good controller.
It's a good controller. Now,
all the magic is in the firmware.
That's very true.
The important part here is that you can get this drive for 47 cents a gig now. Oh my god. That's 960 gigs for $454.95 with free shipping through Amazon. Now you can get, if you don't want to spend quite that much money, you can get a 480 gig now for $259, or you can get the 240 gig for $125.
That's cheap.
That's just a little bit over 50 cents. Now, the 120 gigs, obviously it's not nearly as good a deal. The 240 gig is a great option. If you have a laptop that you want to upgrade that has a 2.5-inch drive, this is perfect. Most people don't need that much storage on their laptop. 480 gig for $259 is awesome. And if you want to have an SSD and have it be like your only storage, right? Unless you're doing a whole lot of archiving stuff, right? You don't have to worry about moving games back and forth between Steam libraries.
What if your wife is an archivist? She need a lot of these SSDs.
You're going to need more storage.
Allyn doesn't need more storage.
No,
he doesn't. No. He does not need more storage. So that's my pick. I think, like I said, I'm recommending this. I don't have one of these drives. Allyn, have you tested an M500?
Not an M500.
Okay, but we know the controller at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's got 502 customer reviews with 4.5 stars. And that's a pretty good overall kind of what to expect. You're not going to get a lot of DOAs on that product, would be my guess.
No, it's a good drive. Remember, I mean, it's coming from Micron, which is one half of the IMFT thing, right?
Yep. 405 ratings are 5 stars. 21 ratings are 1 star. My guess is almost all of those are DOA.
Yeah, I would consider the reliability close to Intel of that drive.
All right. So that's my pick. If you're listening to this after the fact, you can get the link in the show notes if you want that directly. Let's go to Jeremy.
So if somebody could go out and, buy me the Cyberith Virtualizer, that'd be nice.
Okay.
And you can pick me up an Oculus Rift.
When's your birthday?
And also, hey, he's found some use for the Wii nunchucks. But you've probably seen this video over the last week or so. It's either the Skyrim one, which is what I linked to, or the Arma 3 one.
Some mega mascara like this guy does, so you can match your character.
If you're going to try and live Skyrim, you kind of have to. Further can.
I'm walking. So I'm walking. I'm turning. I'm walking.
This just looks ridiculously fun. I mean, I can see definitely some GUI issues with like your inventory and switching things, but frankly, the argument about fat gamers, well, if you're playing a first-person shooter, you ain't going to be fat anymore because you're going to be running a lot. And yes, he did actually put some voice activation on that. The wait, what was him activating a Dovahkiin scream?
Of course it was.
Fusroda!
Fusroda! I don't know. This
doesn't
just
look like he's aiming very well.
So much better than the VR that I can remember seeing in the malls back in the late 80s, where you put the headset on and you moved around and you sort of took it off by the time you were too nauseous to move.
Yeah, I did a lot of that.
Yeah, but you hook that up with the newer Oculus VR, the new developer's model that's come out recently. And this just looks like so much fun. And frankly, what he's talking about is I think it's $400 for the little treadmill-y thing and another $400 for the Oculus Rift. That's out of the realms of somebody who can
Hey, you know what? My rolling machine is $900 brand new right now. And if you play that stinking game for 2 hours every other day,
I'm impressed. It does the thing that he's actually walking against doesn't look particularly heavy. But he's obviously leaning. See, when he walks forward, he's leaning into it, right? So he's putting all his weight forward.
Well, I mean, the thing around his waist is a bunch of elastic bands on a belt.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going to try and run on a surface which is so it's like Teflon.
Until my cat, cops a hairball onto it, and I, try to run on that.
Slip, fall.
Well, we hope it's hydrophobic too, so you can just sort of scrape it off.
Yeah,
super hydrophobic. Okay, that's pretty cool. So it says he opened up pre-orders for $4.99.
Yeah,
yeah, that's way more.
It's
expensive.
Not beyond reason.
Yeah, I would waste $500 on that, and I already have an Oculus Rift.
Technically, I have it. I'm trying to teach myself not to get sick with it.
Yeah. Great. Awesome. So Cyberith, Cyberith.
From what I understand, coming to a Kickstarter near you.
Of course. The video has reached 500,000 views. This is pretty cool. When's it going to ship? Can I order it next week?
You can order it next week.
I'm more of an impulse buyer. So
I don't know if it'll arrive, but you can pay for it and order it next week.
All right, Josh, what do you got for us?
This is nice. Well, the thing that Jeremy was talking about, because it's got the no slip flat. Because the other guys who were showing that at QuakeCon, you had to wear spiked golf shoes to run around in this parabolic
it had like a dish that you walked in.
Okay. And it makes a terrible sound.
Yeah, you got headphones on. Who cares? No, who cares what your family thinks?
I know. Who really cares?
What do you got?
Downstairs neighbor.
Speaking of sound, you know what? Standalone sound is still really good. ASUS Their Zonar DSX PCIe 7.1 GX 2.5 is really inexpensive and it's good sound. It's got good support for earlier games that support EAX and other 3D type audio things. It's a step above all motherboard sound. And it's only, less than $60?
I have a question that might be a pet peeve. And
okay.
Does the PCI version of this card require the extra floppy style power connector?
Well, look at the picture again.
I see no extra floppy power connector.
Really?
Negatory.
I also don't see a removable op amp, but that's not a huge issue.
I think that the PCIe X1 is a 25 watt.
Okay, well, I only bring this up because the Zonar DX, the original one, you had to have that connector connected or the card didn't work, which caused me to purchase a Zonar D1, which was the PCI version of it, which I still use to this day, by the way. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, they're great cards, but I just, if you got to do that extra connector thing, it's like, eh.
Yeah, I think...
come on. Don't you remember the days of the MPC connector?
Well,
if you wanted your CD audio to come through your sound card.
The issue was that the pins that the connector that they used had the flatter pins. Like the floppy connector connects to really square pins if you look at them head on, versus the pins they decided to go with were these flat ones. So the connector was kind of finicky and, kind of intermittent connection. And every time I would do that, it would crash the entire sound card subsystem of the PC, and you had to reboot to get your sound back.
This does not require power.
Oh, good.
It's got aux in, SPDIF in. Yeah, that's not a power connector.
Yeah.
Well, then perhaps that is the one I will go to when I...
Perhaps you should.
When I'm forced to no longer have a PCI slot on my motherboard.
Should have been last year.
No, I'm still rocking the i7, the old i7 920.
He was in the Navy. He likes backwards compatibility.
Yes.
All right. Allyn, that leads us with you. What is your pick?
I know Ryan's going to have reservations, which I encourage him to voice.
I will.
However, so every once in a while you get one of these online storage guys. Dropbox does this too. They'll run some kind of deal. They had some beta photo import feature that gave you up to 5 gig free on your account if you used it only during a certain window of time. Now you can only get 3 gig out of it. Box.com is trying to encourage people to adopt, and that's they're doing one of their little drives, except this unlocks your account for 50 gig. So the catch is you have to log into your account with an iOS device. Now, it doesn't matter if you already had your account, say you made it a year ago, you forgot about it, like I did. I saw this thing, I logged in with an iOS device, poof, the account becomes a 50 gig account. Now, I know, what is the limit? What is the transfer limit per day or something?
So this is not the first time they've done this, because I have never used Box.net, but I logged in with my normal email address, and I have an account that has 50 gigs of total available. But your bandwidth used is 0 bytes of 10 gigabytes.
For how long? What is that?
Doesn't say. And then my max file size is 250 megabytes. And I can upload files up to 5 gigabytes if I view my upgrade options.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So.
Well, it might be handy for if somebody just wants some extra online, not on your site kind of backup.
Yeah.
Something. You just want to stick stuff there and you're not necessarily using it all the time. Hey, it's 50 gig. That's nothing to sneeze at, even though there are limits to it, obviously. But if it takes you a couple of days or a week or whatever to be able to use the whole 50 gig.
Man, if Dropbox had a bandwidth limit on me, I'd have quit that stuff so long
ago. It wouldn't have worked a long time ago. But I did notice when this promo came out, Box.net didn't really have much in the way of syncing apps and stuff like that the last time I had looked at it, and now they do.
Yeah.
Now it works very much just like Dropbox. It puts the same folder in the same kind of place.
It's I think it's just Box.com.
Or Box.com, sorry.
They finally bought that URL, so it used to just be Box.net. Now it's just Box.
Yeah. Now it's just Box because they bought them all or whatever.
It's not Dropbox, it's Box.
Yeah. But if you're not using a lot of bandwidth, I think the ideal thing I see it as is sort of stagnant data that you don't want only in your house You know, the really, really kind of important stuff that you just want to have off-site. Hey, it's for 50 gig for free.
All your joshtech.com background images, for example.
Yes,
Exactly.
Yes, exactly. Those are vital.
Yeah, you can't lose that.
Maybe we should add more images.
Maybe we should. If anybody wants to submit a new picture that I can add to joshtech.com, that's 2Ks, joshtech. Please let me know. Send me an email. We'll get that up there. That's going to wrap up the show. Thanks for everybody who hung out live and dealt with all of our issues earlier in the afternoon. If you want to deal with all of our issues earlier in the day, you can do so every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Eastern at pcper.com/live. And if you want to sign up to know when we go live, just go to pcper.com/subscribe and give us your name and email address, and we promise we don't send anything else out in it. That's going to be it. We're going to wrap up the show because I got to go sleep. And that's it. So we'll see you guys next week. Am I forgetting anything? I feel like I'm wrapping up too close here. It's at the end.
The toll-free number. You got to give them the toll-free number.
1-877-JOSH-TECH. 2Ks. Don't call that. I have no idea where it goes.
But somebody's going to be upset.
I'm going to call it. Actually, hold on. Let me... now I'm interested.
Call it and ask for papers.
It's like when I was in engineering school, people would call 1-800-HELP-ECT, electronic circuit theory, and we're
going to do this together, everybody.
Oh, I thought it was going to be help, etc.
We're calling 1-877-JOSH-TECH. Here we go.
Your call is being answered by Audix. Is not available. To leave a message, wait for the tone. When finished,
Papers.
press pound for more options. Otherwise, for assistance, press 0 now. Record at the tone.
We're trying to get a hold of JOSH-TECH. 2Ks, JOSH-TECH? That's all I got. I don't even know who it was.
You know, you were weak.
You never prank called, did you?
I didn't. I don't even know who it, it didn't give me a name. Like, if it said, this is a voicemail box for, Jimmy, I would talk with Jimmy. I don't know.
Yeah, this is JoshTech.com. I have some problems with the imagery on your website. If you could change that around to something that is less conundrumatic, it would be very copious to my personality. So, yeah, thanks.
Perhaps more Putin-friendly?
Is your refrigerator running? Edward Snowden gave me that joke in the chat room, so
Sweet.
That's where we're at. All right, we're going to sign off. Thanks for joining us on the show, guys. We'll see you next week. I'm Ryan Schraub.
Jeremy Hellstrom.
I'm Josh Walrath.
And I'm Alan Malmitano.